This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host Mr. Nick Hodge, and this is episode 11 of Bizarro World. Nick, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. The sun is shining, the snow is melting, and the birds have arrived.
It is springtime. I am so amped up. I love springtime next to summer. It's my favorite season. Here in sunny Austin, it's already 80 degrees. The pool looks great. The weather's amazing. Baseball season starting. So a happy time of the year.
Agree. It's not my favorite season, but certainly love whenever we get a new season and some change and get to change up the activities and habits. So have already gone fishing. Have, like I said, seen the snow melt. We had some 20 or 30 inches of snow in February, so that's now melting. It's good to see. So, yeah, feeling good. It's March Madness. I run the pool, the office pool. So, yeah, lots of stuff going on.
The no cash, no gambling office pool for the law enforcement community that I know follows along from time to time. Lots going on in the world. The Fed tapped out. Australia egg boy, the Australian politician that got egged. That was hilarious, and the response to the kid getting tackled was equally hilarious. The fake outrage machine was going. Mortgage rates are dropping. The markets are volatile. New Zealand is not messing around. They went ahead immediately and said, we're banning all assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. Robert Kraft is trying to get off again, and it looks like they're going to let him, but they want him to feel guilty about it. Lots going on. Where do we start? Should we start with the markets?
Yep.
Let's do it. So the Fed meeting this week resulted in what we've been saying was going to happen because the math told you this is what had to happen. They basically said no more interest rate hikes in 2019. We're only projecting one in 2020. That's a drastic U-turn from the language they had communicated to the market before. Again, I'm not surprised, and I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. Not only will you not see that one rate hike in 2020, but by the end of this year or early 2020, you will see a rate cut. Gold didn't surge, but it popped. The dollar, after an initial sell-off, has strengthened. Gold has held up well despite the 1% rally in the dollar. Treasury yields are dropping. The market is looking to force the Fed's hand on that rate cut. They got to work right away, Nick. The market's down some 300-400 points right now. And I think that's just the market signaling to the Fed, since you have decided that you are going to accommodate us, we're going to force your hand, and you're not hiking in 2020, you're cutting.
Where to start? Initial thoughts are, if you hadn't lost it already, how could you have any remaining credibility for the Fed? Or believability, whatever word you want to choose there. They, like you said, completely reversed their forecast. They're talking about 2% growth this year and then below 2% growth next year. We talked a bit about this last week. And so the thing that kind of worries me a bit is that it's almost too clear, right? It's like clearly telegraphed that they weren't going to raise at the meeting this week, and that they likely weren't going to raise in 2019. There is now, I won't call it consensus, but a lot of people in the resource space and analysts that seem to think that, like I say, the writing is on the wall, that, and you just said it, that not only can they not raise, but that they're going to have to cut, whether that's later this year or in 2020. But that sort of is the blueprint, if you will, for gold's ascent, right? What we've been waiting for, the 1350, 74, 1400, et cetera. And it just worries me that everyone is so confident that it's that easy. I would just caution that it never is.
It never is. Points taken. That's well said. I think it's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I do believe that we've put in a pretty good base here at that $1,300 level. I love how that's held up well. For the people that have asked me why gold will benefit in an environment where money is cheap, Rates are down. There's going to be stimulus all around the world, I believe, coordinated. My answer to them is this. There is now $11 trillion of sovereign debt carrying negative yields. That makes gold an asset class that will get you more than zero, right? And it'll sure in the hell get you a lot more than negative. So I think, I've always said that it was going to have to be treasury money coming out of the market, bond money coming out, and a little bit of that going into the gold space. And $11 trillion of sovereign debt with a negative yield is not sustainable. It's going to make funds have to take a look at gold as a hedge and diversifier. And again, it's not a huge market, folks. Gold will surge on small, tiny amounts of large capital coming in. So those are my thoughts. That's my quick, simple answer as to why gold will benefit.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? The pet rock's a good boy.
Jerome's a good boy too. Go, Mr. Powell, right? It is what it is. We're boxed in. I've said we're boxed in. We're still, I think, in the U.S. the cleanest dirty shirt. You're seeing concerns out of Europe now. Growth is slowing. Germany had a horrible print as far as productivity goes. China seems to be slowing down, but they've already said that they will stimulate their way out of it. So again, I think it's good times coming here in the second half of this year with volatility, but good times coming for the gold space.
We shall see. On your quality names.
We will see. It's been a tough couple of years. I have the balance sheet and the picks to prove it. So we're going to see if it pays off, right?
That's exactly right. We know that we're leveraged. We know that we're in the right place. We're waiting for a bit of cooperation in the market, and that's led to some interesting decisions. We continue to see, or at least I do, new deals come across the desk, and so it's the question now has become, where does the capital get allocated? Right? Do I want to try to chase? Maybe chase isn't the right word, but invest in some of these new deals at lower share prices? Knowing in the back of my mind that low share prices can always get lower and I might have to average down on them in the future, or do I average down on the ones I already know to be quality assets that I might be down on a bit now, but where I can buy some more shares of instead of investing in new deals and lower my overall entry price to be profitable more quickly when the turn comes. So questions I'm sure many investors are grappling with, but that's sort of where we are in the cycle.
And I would encourage everybody, and this is what I'm doing personally, companies that despite this brutal bear market have managed to maintain a good share structure, lower their burn rate, roll in quality, accretive assets that have good exploration upside. I'm doubling and tripling down on all of those companies. Companies like Nevada Sunrise, Hannon Metals, we talked a little bit off air, is another one that I like. But there's a lot of juniors that have $4, $5, $6 million market caps with excellent assets, good share structure, experience management. So I would start there, as I always encourage everyone to do. Look at the share structure. Look what management teams have done during the bear market, because if we get a good market, it stands to reason that those companies will do very well as a result of the responsible stewardship during the bear market.
Well said.
Nebraska, the Midwest, Iowa, catastrophic, flooding. Man, they have been hit hard. And, it's odd to me. We pick on the media here, deservedly so. I think they play an important part, the serious journalist out there. But, man, this is a story that, frankly, should have been on the radar weeks ago, right? They are just getting it. It's tough. They're saying that not only has there been lives lost, right? There's been several people that have died, but the economic impact, you have tariffs that were already affecting farmers in the Midwest. The rains, the freezing, the flooding has not helped. Any thoughts there, Nick?
The first thing that comes to mind is it's the same with the cyclone in Mozambique. I mean, hundreds dead or missing, and hasn't been covered either. Calling it, the UN has called it, I think, the worst natural disaster in that part of the country in 2 decades or something. And so nothing terribly new in parts of the world that aren't New York, LA, London, Tokyo, etc., where things happen. They don't get the coverage that they do if they happen in those major first world population centers. As it relates to Nebraska specifically, yeah, it continues to be tough. We've talked about agriculture on this show a bit before. What do you do? It's we see the story. We see the changing weather patterns in the news, and I'd like to talk about water a bit later, I think. But just one of those things that is a more important story than the media purports it to be. And I'm sure later we're going to talk about um, Robert Kraft and Adam Levine's nipples. I wanted to get to again, and maybe it's our fault a bit
Everybody wants to get to Adam
as
Levine's nipples,
well.
Nick.
So, I mean, what do you do? It's just sort of the way it is, and unfortunate circumstances for people in that part of the country that have dealt with tornadoes, devastatingly so in the past couple of years. And so, find a good charity, donate what you can, send some goods if you can, and that's about it for me.
Yeah, we talk about media bias, and it seems like anytime there's a storm coming in New York, we hear about it a week ahead of time, and you have, evening specials every day on how to prepare. And it does piss me off a little bit that here you've had historic flooding, historic damage to lives, to the economy, and it's relatively quiet. It's so underreported. Media's got to do a better job, man, if they want to maintain the little bit of credibility they have left, right?
Did Jim Cantori go? That's how you know that it's an important story to the media when Jim Cantori shows up in his appropriate garb to show you whether that's the flood garb or wind garb or snow garb. He will be there.
Yeah. I've yet to see him there. We'll see. Hopefully, it's a story that gets more attention, more coverage. Tough times. So thoughts and prayers, right? Good vibes that way.
Come on, Jim. Go throw a canoe in 6 inches of water. We're waiting for you.
Egg Boy, can we talk about Egg Boy?
I would love to. I have thoughts.
I love it. I want to get to your thoughts. I saw some of your comments on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious. There's 3 parts to the story. The first part is young 17-year-old Will Connolly, now known as Egg Boy, egged an Australian senator. He went up. He pretended to be a supporter. He had his phone in one hand and egg in the other and went up and just boom, put an egg in right on top of his head there. Mr. Connolly was subsequently tackled by 2 members of the senator's camp. That's the first part. That's the second part to the story. The outrage around that. People saying they were too tough on the kid, and why did they have to use so much force? Which I think is an absolute joke. If you hit someone on the head with anything, you don't know what else is coming, right? So that's that part. The third part, and this just came out here a couple of days ago, is that one of the gentlemen that tackled the Egg Boy was already facing charges for storming a church service with a sword and a megaphone. So the guy's a far-right activist who went into a church apparently a few years back and basically said he was going to bring the wrath of God to everybody in the service. So that's a new angle to the story. There was a warrant out for his arrest. Thoughts, Nick? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. I know you have opinions on this.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great story all around. One, and let me just start by saying that the 2019, it must be the year of the egg. There's eggs popping up all over. I don't know if you remember, but around New Year's, there was a big story that just a plain picture of a brown egg became the most liked picture on Instagram, surpassing the newborn baby picture of Kylie Jenner's spawn. So there's something about eggs this year. No, look, it's a great story. Why? One, because a young kid was expressing political activism through relatively, what relatively is the important word there, nonviolent means. He took
Absolutely.
issue with senator's stance on immigration, and he didn't like that, and so he decided to take action, which is commendable on one part. Was it the smartest thing to smash an egg on the back of a senator's head? Probably not. In the U.S., you might have got yourself shot, but at the same time, do like we've talked about thoughts and prayers and signs, and that stuff doesn't really work. So hey, an egg, a pie, that's like I don't mind it too much, right?
I commend the young lad. Absolutely.
So two, he took what he deserved, right? I mean, the senator turned around and hit him in the face twice. Some pretty, as I reviewed the footage a couple of times, some stiff open palm slaps to the face. One more of a stiff arm and one more of a good hard wallop to the side of the head. Which, hey,
Absolutely.
if someone smacks me on the back of the head with an egg, I might turn around swinging as well.
You're getting hit. Absolutely. The kid took it like a champ, though. It was like an open-handed jab. And mind you, the senator was, he had to be a good 6'3", 6'4". It was a solid open hand slap. I think, he did that one right, too. I think he recognized, hey, this is a kid. I'm not going to punch him, but let me give him a couple of good ones to the side of the head. And, the kid took it well, though. And I love that he hasn't complained a bit. You didn't see him playing the victim. You didn't see him asking for anyone to be arrested or charged. He went for what he went. He executed. He took what came, and that was that. End of story from his end of it, right?
Exactly right. We can just dismiss the fake outrage, which was what was getting everybody riled up, saying that, oh, it was too much violence. They should have acted that way. Just ignore that stuff, man. That's like we talked about last week, like two people on Twitter causing some sort of fake outrage or issue. Just squash that, man. This is actually a good event because, and this is the third point I was going to make, is the kid was released without charges. He got to make his political point. The senator got his retribution, the two open-faced slaps, and that's it. Nobody's criminally charged. It was a pretty good event. Well done, Australia. I commend you. In the U.S., the kid would have been like a domestic terrorist or something. I don't know. We would have done some crazy shit around this event. But in Australia, you can just slap him twice and move on with life. I like it.
I like it. Do we want to talk New Zealand?
Yeah, I got thoughts on New Zealand. Not as many, but yeah, we can hit on it for a second.
Let's get to it. So, New Zealand, obviously the tragedy there recently. They aren't messing around. The Prime Minister announced that they will be banning all assault rifles and all high capacity magazines. I'm very pro Second Amendment. I don't think we do it right in this country. I will say that the New Zealand Prime Minister's leadership in the way that she embraced the community, the Muslim community, the victims, and was very clear about not giving any attention to the attacker, not mentioning his name, not giving him the fame that he sought. I commend her for that. I don't know if an outright ban is my cup of tea, but I must say, contrary to what politicians do in this country, that's leadership, right? Whether you agree or not. I mean, it took a week and that's it. It's done.
I agree she handled the tragedy well. I, of course, agree that you shouldn't give the shooter fame, and she did well by mentioning his name. I of course, do not agree with the weapons ban. And the point, or really the only thing I want to say about it is, you instantly see the comparisons. Well, look how easy it was for New Zealand to do it. Why can't America just be that easy to solve the issue is not the right way to put it, because you're not going to solve the issue if you ban guns, just like you don't solve murder by making murder illegal. But this is the answer. Look, there's no constitutional amendment to bear arms in New Zealand, one, that facilitates much easier creation of laws to ban them. And two, what is there, like 5 people in New Zealand? Good luck taking guns from 100 million Americans.
100 million Americans, where there are more guns than people in this country, right? There's 300 something million people in America. There's more guns than people. So yeah, good luck with that. I do believe there's a place for intelligent discussions about what we allow and how you're allowed to purchase a weapon and who is allowed to purchase a weapon. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, New Zealand, not messing around.
No, they did it. But it's not analogous to the situation in the United States for many reasons, two of which I just articulated.
Agreed. Are we going to get to Adam Levine's nipples? Is it time?
You want to do it?
Let's get it, Nick.
All right. So you remember the nipples, right?
Nipplegate. That was it. Yeah.
Sumptuous chiseled body of that 4-year-old lead singer coming out at the Super Bowl there. So, well, time has passed.
Yes.
Curmudgeons have had time to contact the appropriate government channels to voice their concerns about such lewd activities. And so we now know that a month after the Super Bowl, I think the number was 116 complaints came in to the government about the Super Bowl content, of which half were specifically about Adam's nipples. So that means that 80 Puritans in this country decided to take the time to write the government to say the nipples were bad. And so Adam's nipples, they come to the fore once again.
You know what I find interesting? You mentioned the Puritans and the upright and the moral police. What I find interesting is that guess which day is the day that the most amount of people watch porn?
Oh, gosh. Valentine's Day.
No, Sunday.
Oh, the holy day?
The holy day is the day where the majority of people log on, or the most amount of people log on to see porn at home, right? So I found that interesting. And the other thing I found interesting is regionally, if you do a per capita, and I don't know why I remember this, but if you do a per capita analysis of where people are logging on to see their favorite porn star, Utah is the area with the highest concentration, the highest percentage. Fun fact, everybody, literally.
Sunday fun day.
So, Mr. Levine's nipples, if that gets you, gets your panties bunched up and gets you a little uppity and tight, you might want to reconsider what you're doing with your life, man. There's far more important issues to write about, but to each their own, right?
Yeah, and if you just mentioned porn data, and actually Pornhub has a fairly serious side to it where it releases quality data from time to time about some of the things you're talking about. So let me give you an example. Like what you just did, where the highest concentration of people searching for their favorite porn star in Utah. But they'll even do things like, let's say, I don't know, the New York Knicks are playing the LA Lakers tonight, and the game ends at 9:30 and the Lakers lose. Well, they'll see if there's a bump in porn search activity in like the 15 minutes like preceding a loss from a hometown or something like that. And they do all sorts of cool data like that. So I don't know, we'll put a link up or Google like Pornhub, porn data analytics or something, and you'll find all sorts of cool stuff.
So for data analytics, everyone, that's Pornhub.com. Let's keep it there. Robert Kraft is trying to get off again. The government has offered him a deal. They're saying we will allow you to just not have to worry about prison or charges or any of that, as long as you admit that you were actually guilty of what we charged you with initially, which is, of course, soliciting prostitution. Kraft, obviously, successful billionaire, best lawyers money can buy. They have filed a motion to make sure that the video, because apparently there's video of him engaging in these acts in the location where he was going to, right? The massage parlor that he was going to. So interesting. Thoughts on that? I mean, it's kind of exactly the way I thought it was going to play out. No jail time. He'll keep his ball club. Everything dismissed. I am intrigued by the fact that they want to make him feel guilty.
Yeah, money talks, slap on the wrist, whether, it's, I don't know, HSBC or Deutsche Bank laundering money for terrorists or Bob Kraft getting a handy in Florida. They just, get to pay a fine and move on.
And supposedly it was like two within a day. So he went in one evening and woke up the next morning. Was like, that was fantastic. It went right back. So I guess there's a couple of videos floating around. So, hey, Mr. Kraft, 70 something years old, if I'm not mistaken. It was consensual. It turns out that the females that worked there weren't actually, and this had been reported before, that they possibly were being sex trafficked. And so that turns out, according to the media, to not have been the case, which is a good thing. We wouldn't be making jokes if indeed that was the case, and I wouldn't be advocating for him to get off if he was contributing to that. So yeah, interesting. Another thing I found interesting is pictures have surfaced of the woman who owned the chain of massage parlors once upon a time, the founder of them. I guess she is a very well connected, and by well connected I mean posing for pictures with the president and Mr. Kraft and other people recently. A lot of fundraisers on the Republican side of it. So I thought that was interesting, and I also thought it was interesting that Mr. Trump made sure that everybody knew that Robert Kraft was invited to the White House and was a great guy. So small world, I guess.
She's Mama San to the stars.
Well done. Well done. We'll put a link up for that too. You wanted to talk water. What'd you have in mind, Nick?
Well, there's all kinds of stuff with water, and it's something that I started writing about 10 years ago. Did a chapter in a book about it, and it's something that just never gains traction in the public sphere. Nobody cares about it because every day when they wake up and they turn on their faucet, they have water to brush their teeth, and so nobody cares. But if you look at things like, I don't know, Flint, Michigan, or I'm sure well the problems they have in Chicago, just really bad problems, whether it's aging infrastructure or lead pipes or pollution or water not being where it's supposed to be, or cities having to raise rates to install or replace aging infrastructure that prices out lower income people from clean water. There's a multitude of issues that are constantly changing and never getting addressed. And so I just wanted to spend a second or two drawing attention to it and maybe throwing up a couple links. And also because I went fishing this week, I took a day off and I spent the day on.
Took a day off?
It's rare. I took a day off, and it was actually a day off because where I went fishing, there was no service. And so I couldn't do like the half day off thing where I'm still like working on my phone. So yeah, I took a day off, and this lake, which, let me give you the history of the lake. It's not really a lake. It's a man-made reservoir, but an absolutely giant one. So, long story short, back in the day, like World War II day, they needed a bunch of power to make planes in Washington State, which we still make planes here, like Boeing and stuff. And so they decided to dam up the Columbia River. And so they did. They dammed it up for like half the state of Washington and created a giant lake from like the middle of Washington all the way up to the Canadian border and even a little bit into Canada. They wanted to build it even bigger, but they didn't have time to get a treaty with Canada. Anyway, they made this giant lake to create power. So they put a huge dam, right? That's how they made the lake. They dammed the Columbia River. And so it's largely credited with helping us win World War II because it supplied us enough power to be able to make enough planes to beat the Nazis and the Japanese. And so the lake is just so interesting because, I'm not really from a lake culture. I'm from the East Coast, and this is just normal out here. But the lake, when I was on it this week, was down like, I don't know, 80 to 100 feet, like a quarter of a football field or a third of a football field. You could just like see up the bank, and they do that because they have to draw the lake way down because the snow's about to melt in the mountains in Washington and up in Canada. And so there's going to be literally a deluge of water coming, and it's going to fill the reservoir up. It has to be topped off by Washington state law. This reservoir has to be full by July 4th so everybody can enjoy their docks and piers and boating on the reservoir, etc. And the gentleman who took me fishing just happens to be a dam operator, and so I get the inside perspective on dams and some water issues. And so he was talking to me about, meetings they've had, either policy meetings or planning meetings where the public gets to voice their opinion. And I just wanted to talk about this for a second because you always see, environmentalists in the headlines or people showing up and voicing their opinion, whether it's about, the reintroduction of wolves or
Yep.
the Dakota Access Pipeline or whatever it is. And if you're not really living knee deep in those situations, I think the debate can really get skewed and there's a lot of misinformation. And let me just give you an example. So, I'll give you two real quick. He was telling me that they still have policy meetings for this Columbia River Dam that made Lake Roosevelt. And I should also say it's the single largest power producing standalone station in the country. Like the Hoover Dam gets a lot of recognition, but the Hoover Dam is like a barrel fire compared to the like Roosevelt Dam. I mean, this thing it's like 5 gigs or something, man.
Holy
It's like
smokes.
it's like 4 nuclear plants. Yeah, so it's giant. And anyway, he says people still show up to meetings that want to like decommission the dam and say that it should never be built and, cite the salmon and this and that, which I get the salmon argument a little bit, but there's fish lifts and there's fish passages. And you might be living under Nazi rule if it weren't for the fucking dam, you idiot.
Right. The importance of
So
knowing your
that's
history, right?
yeah, that's one. And two, and this one is really, really funny, actually. So he was talking about meetings they were having for a dam
I'm
in
sorry,
Yosemite.
I got to cut in real quick, Nick. That should be a shirt. If it weren't for the dam, you'd be living under Nazi rule, you fucking idiot. That should be a t-shirt. All right, continue. This is what happens when I don't call him
Jesus.
smart, everybody. I don't call him smart in the introduction, and you're going to get facts, 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 facts. Preach on, Nick.
So they were having a meeting about this dam in Yosemite Park, which was like it was the first, and I'm not sure if it's still the only, but it was the first dam built on a federal park, which is Yosemite in Northern California. And so they were having meetings on, whether to keep maintaining this dam or decommission it or what should we do. And um, this group shows up from San Francisco. And this is an important part, right? Because oftentimes in these meetings, environmental groups just send a representative from out of town, whether it's Greenpeace or PETA or whatever it is that didn't grow up in the area, that don't know the local politics, sort of like mining, right? You just go in an area and start talking shit you don't know anything about.
Oh, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on my stock of the week. But yes, continue.
So they wanted to get rid of this dam in Yosemite, which, it would have let the lake that it created flood and it wouldn't have created any more power. And so that was their stance, right? And so this is like the punchline. They're an environmental group from San Francisco. They want to get rid of this dam. Yeah. Hey, do you know, Gerardo, which dam and reservoir provides the water to San Francisco?
That damn dam.
That damn dam.
That is funny, not funny, man. So where does that stand now? Where is that debate?
I think the dams are in good standing. It's an ongoing debate. It's similar to the wolf debate in that there are two sides and there's seemingly no common ground. But not nuclear, hydro in Washington State is safe. We have cheap, low power. It's emission free, and there's very low environmental consequences. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I just wanted to highlight some of the idiocy and what you don't see when these people, he was calling them eco-terrorists, but when these people grab the headlines, right? Because the headline would be environmental group wants to get rid of dam on federal parkland. That's what
Right.
the headline would be, right?
Sure. Interesting. You're on a roll. What other insightful stories you have for me, Nick?
Oh God, what else do I want to talk about? Well, we can talk about the wolves. They do the same thing with the wolves here. I mean, uh, they send people to these meetings, and well, let me talk about horses. Actually, let me talk about the horses for a second. So we have wild horses.
Yep.
It's a big problem. I don't know if you know, but they kill people and
Yep.
they cost a lot of money for the government to deal with. People crash into them with cars. They go on ranches and break fences and eat crops and et cetera, et cetera. And we have them here in Washington, which I actually didn't know until this week when I saw a herd of wild horses on the Indian reservation adjacent to the lake where I was fishing. And so I asked the guy I was fishing with and did a little bit of reading. And he was telling me they have meetings on how to deal with these horses as well that he went to because his parents own a cattle ranch, 1,000-acre cattle ranch. And so they have an interest in these things. And he was saying that, again, people show up, environmentalists or whatever you want to call them, at these meetings, and there's just no common ground. So he was telling me at one of these horse meetings, somebody got up and was saying that they shouldn't do anything, that once there's enough horses, that the cougar and wolf population will then grow and eat more horses so that the problem will be balanced out in time.
Huh. That's fascinating.
I don't I don't think any of the locals bought any of that, man. They just want to fucking shoot the horses, right?
Yep.
I mean,
the argument is fascinating, though. The way they, you know.
and they don't want more wolves, and they don't want more cougars because the wolves are already eating their cows, and the state, you're already not allowed to shoot a wolf in Washington, whereas you can shoot them in Idaho. And so what do ranchers do? They just take to shooting wolves and not telling anybody. I mean, that's how it goes, right? You ban guns, you just don't tell anybody you have guns. I mean, that's what the people don't think of that want to enact these policies. And so someone gets up at this meeting who actually knows what they're talking about, who has done work with the North American conservation program where hunters are the stewards, right? You allow access to hunt the animal, you sell tags to hunt that animal, and not only are the hunters helping to manage the population, but the money that they pay for their hunting licenses and tags go to the government to further help the problem, which to me seems like a more common sense solution. So this gentleman gets up and he says exactly that. Hey, there's low-income families in eastern Washington and North Idaho and certainly on the Indian reservation. Why don't we create a small program that allows them to hunt these horses and sell tags, and then they can use the meat? Because, people eat horse meat, not a lot of Americans, but a lot of the rest of the world. And certainly some people here. So that seemed like a common sense, or at least a straightforward solution, or one that you could work from, right? It actually gets rid of some of the horses. It creates money to fund a program to further help manage the horse problem. He said, the gentleman that I was fishing with said the environmentalist at the meeting literally had physical reactions where they were like stomping their feet and kicking their chairs and became physically, emotionally upset and distraught. So basically, they threw a temper tantrum, right? They can't even entertain this notion of killing a horse, right? Literally no common ground. And so I don't know, it was just very interesting to me. I mean, I don't really have a point there. It's just, look, you got a horse problem. You can't just let the horse problem get worse to try to make it better. I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? And so, look, you got to kill horses. You got to kill horses. But and I guess the point is that that's a microcosm of debates about nearly everything we have in this country, is that there's two extremely partisan sides, whether it's climate change or the Green New Deal or universal basic income or how to tax people or how to get rid of the debt or whatever it is, right? You get two extreme sides that have an opinion, that have some funding, and that don't give any middle ground for there to be a common sense solution.
Yeah, let's talk about that too. I have opinions about a lot of things, but I try to keep my opinion on things that I'm knowledgeable about, or at the very least have some insight about, right? So we live in an era, man, where everybody feels like they have to have an opinion about everything. And you know what? Some people should just shut the fuck up and not have an opinion about everything, because, it makes for dilutive debates. It really waters down the knowledge base of society when everybody has to speak on everything, right? So I'll just leave that there. I think that's a really good example of it. I'm gonna talk a little bit later. My stock of the week has been the subject recently of outside groups going into a community, anti-mining groups, people that are not from the community, people that in many instances aren't even from the country, and they rile shit up in hopes of getting a paycheck. And if you don't give them the check, if you do things correctly the way this company is, then they manufacture outrage and oppose even the most common sense of proposals. And so, yeah, we don't have to have an opinion about everything, people. It's okay to say, I'm not sure about that. That's not my fight to fight. But yeah, that was really interesting, Nick. Very, very interesting.
Thanks.
Any feel-good stories? It's spring. I'm happy. I'm smiling. I'm caffeinated. It's Friday.
No, I think we did it in the beginning. Yeah, happy equinox. The grass is growing. It's time for new beginnings and changes, and so embrace that and enjoy it.
I like it. I got one, and this is 2 years old. I don't care. It made me smile. It made me happy. I'll put the link up. But there's a U.S. veteran, an Army veteran, who rescued a bald eagle that was hanging from a tree with a .22 caliber rifle. U.S. Army veteran Jason Galvin used a .22 caliber rifle with a scope to fire 150 shots at a distant rope that was tangled around the eagle's leg. The bird was hanging upside down near a Minnesota cabin. And, the husband called the police. He called animal control. They said they couldn't do anything about it. And this poor eagle was just going to die up there. And so, this Army vet borrows a gun because his buddy's gun had a better scope, or his buddy's rifle had a better scope than his, on a windy day, and went up there and shot 150 shots at this rope and managed to free the bald eagle. The eagle, was named Freedom. It's in good shape. They wrapped the eagle up in a blanket. It was never hit by any of the bullets and recovered at University of Minnesota's Raptor Center. But that is impressive. I don't know if anybody's got experience shooting with a .22 rifle, but being able to hit a rope and dodge the eagle, good stuff, man. Well done, sir. Jason Galvin is the gentleman's name.
Sounds like there would have been a dead eagle in New Zealand.
I see what you did there, Nick. I see what you did there. What else do we got? I see on your list you got South Korean voyeurism. What is that about?
Oh, this speaks to human nature in a really big way, and maybe even Pornhub. So
I love how it all comes together.
There was these two guys in Korea that had put all these spy cams in hotel rooms, like tiny little ones, so they would film you through the holes in electrical sockets or through like the hair dryer mount in the hotel bathroom. And they had dozens of these cameras installed in many, many hotel rooms in South Korea, and they were selling subscriptions to the feeds.
What?
And people were paying $45 a month. Well, it was $44.95 because it's a better marketing price if it's $95.
Spoken like a marketing guru.
$44.95 a month to get access to these things. And so, again, no point to be made, just to say that clearly enterprising folks to pull it off.
Sick folks, by the way, I might add, because this wasn't consensual.
No doubt. No, not consensual at all. And I was getting to the sick part. Also sick to subscribe. I mean,
yep.
I don't know what your kink is, but mine isn't voyeurism, watching strangers in hotel rooms. But hey, I guess there's enough demand for that, certainly in South Korea, to create a whole business model on that. And so that was just a bizarro story for me.
That is bizarre. Were those people arrested? The people that were, putting these cameras and these mics, unbeknownst to guests, up?
Oh, yeah. And also, they were arrested. And again, we can put a link up, but it exposed, I guess, sort of a wider practice or problem with these spy cams in South Korea. It's I guess, a cultural thing, but one would think that from the stories that have been written there's more of this going on than just this one case.
Yeah, that's obviously if they were making a pretty penny at $45 a pop, $44.95
a month, yeah,
a month.
Right.
Wow. I don't know what porn subscriptions run, but I don't think they're that expensive. And mostly it's
Yeah.
free, right?
That's right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's right. Unless you get, I mean, you can pay for anything you want, specialty feeds or camp shows or whatever. But that's like you say, that's all consensual. That's people putting on a show that are advertising their channel or doing whatever they're doing. This is um, selling strangers intimacy, basically.
Nasty. Nasty. I see Harvard was being sued for photos from 1850. What is that about?
Yeah, fake outrage here. And honestly, I don't know how you couldn't just throw the lawsuit out. The specifics are this: there's a lady who is suing Harvard because they took pictures of her. I forget how many greats. It's like 4 or 5 great grandfathers picture. And this Harvard scientist commissioned these pictures to be taken of slaves back in 1850 because he was a bigot and a racist, and he was trying to use pseudoscience to prove that blacks were an inferior race. And so she's suing for the photos, which I get. If you want to sue for possession of the photos and you think those photos belong to your family, that's fine. But she's suing for like damages, right? And this can open up a whole can of worms. It's like a slippery slope thing. It's like, how can an institution in 2019 be held accountable for the actions of people that have been dead for however many hundreds of years that is, 100 and so many years. And she also wants damages, right? So it's sort of like a reparations type thing. It's like, well, what kind of damages did them taking the pictures actually cause you this amount of time later? And again, why are the people that are alive now responsible for it? And so it's just one of those headline grabbers that it's why would this even be allowed, and how does it help us solve anything now or look forward? So just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's interesting because unlike reparations where you can kind of quantify, let's forget how atrocious, racism is and was and the horrible generational impacts that it's had on families. Putting that to the side and being clear that racism sucks. You could make an intelligent argument, and many have, that reparations are due because you can measure the GDP, you could measure the output, you can measure, lost wages. Again, putting aside all the personal atrocities that occurred as a result of racism, there is an intelligent argument to be made there that, yeah, my family, 3 generations of slaves deserve X amount of dollars because of X, Y, and Z. As to this case, this is just bizarre, right? I mean, bizarre.
Yeah, that's it. Bizarre, right?
Yeah, it's Bizarro World for a reason, everybody.
That's right.
All right, what else we got, Nick?
I think stocks of the week.
Stocks of the week. You wanna kick it off?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I'm getting older, and we've done 11 episodes. I don't know what stocks I've talked about every week, so I hope I haven't talked about.
You're
this
11
one.
episodes older, Nick.
Exactly right. My wife was noticing the gray hairs in my beard this week. It's definitely happening.
Yeah, I call them wisdom hairs. I call them wisdom hairs.
I like it. I'll take it.
Yes,
Radiant Technologies. I hope I haven't talked about this company before. The ticker is RTI in Canada, and I think it's RTDDF in OTC, but don't quote me on that. I bought a couple thousand shares because I'm always doing due diligence on different sectors, and what I've been doing and reading a lot about is marijuana for the past couple of years for obvious reasons. And so I came across this company, and they have a patented and permitted, the second part's important, process for extracting THC and CBDs, the full spectrum of CBDs from the cannabis plant. So step back. In developed cannabis markets like Oregon and Washington and Colorado, we know that the market moves towards extraction. I've mentioned that on this podcast before. It goes to over 50% oil-based, whether that's vaporizer consumption through an inhaler or an atomizer, or needing oils to put into edibles, candies, etc., or creams and lotions, etc. So the extraction process is important, and there's lots of ways to do it. There's butane extraction processes, ethanol extraction processes, supercritical, subcritical. We're not going to get into all of that. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of this discussion. Um, but this company, Radiant Technologies, has a new process. It's called MAP, or the microwave assisted process,
Huh.
where they use microwaves to extract whatever molecule they want, the THC or the CBD, and then they turn it into a powder. So you would have a THC powder that could then be blended with a backer oil, a vape oil, for example, to make an inhalation product, or you could turn the powder into a drink to make THC or CBD infused drink, or you could put the powder in the ingredients of an edible to make you know where I'm going with this, a candy
Yep.
or a brownie or whatever. And so it does it faster. I'm not going to recite them off the top of my head, but go to Radiant's website and you'll see, and more economically. And they just got approved to do this in Canada like 2 weeks ago. They just flipped the switch, and so they are extracting right now. And Aurora has contracted them to do this, so they are Aurora's extraction partner. So all very interesting things. If the market is always goes to oil when it's a developed market, and the markets are developing for cannabis, faster and cheaper always seems to be better in these types of markets. So it's a better mousetrap type deal. And they're moving to file patents on this in the US as well. So Radiant Technologies thought it was interesting.
All right, worth doing some due diligence. Last week, I believe my stock of the week was Midas Gold. It is up 25% since then. So you take a win when you can get a win, right? That's worked out
Right.
well. It was a good call on a low. This week we're gonna talk Almaden Minerals. That's ticker symbol AMM and AAU on the US side. This is a company, and we will put a link up to the video. It's a project that I visited 2 years ago. And at the time, my biggest concern was the relationship with the local community. I could not have walked away more impressed with Almaden's approach to community relations. They hire locally. They bring in local geologists. They train locally. And the bottom line is Morgan Poliquin and the team at Almaden does community relations as well as anyone I know in the space. The project is the Ixtaca polymetallic. It's a gold silver deposit. 4.5 million, and I'm freestyling here, gold equivalent ounces. It's equal parts silver, equal parts gold. It's a feasibility stage project. The company has a market cap of about 75-80 million, I believe, Canadian. They have $5 to $6 million of cash in the bank. The feasibility study demonstrated a 42% after-tax internal rate of return. That's using reasonable prices. $12.75 gold, we're slightly higher, and $17 silver, we're slightly lower, and a capex of 174 million US. Not only that, but they also have a mill. And I know we've talked to Almaden in the past, but I wanted to bring it back up because recently there have been groups out of New York, out of Brazil, that are from outside the community, outside the country, many times, that are basically looking for a paycheck. And what these groups do is they contact the companies that they want to target, and they say, hey, we see that you just did a feasibility study. We see you have an attractive deposit. We see you're getting some attention. Pay us to go away, or we'll go and kick up some dust and pretend like your project is irresponsible, and we'll pay 5 people from the community to disagree. And don't get me wrong, it's a mine, right? It's going to have opposition like all mines and projects do. But the stuff that these people make up is out of this world. I encourage everybody to just click on the link, click on the video. It goes through the history of community relations, the way they've developed the project. And I think it's an absolute steal at these prices, especially in light of what I see a better precious metals space in the second half of this year. So Almaden Minerals, my stock of the week.
It sounds like almost those environmentalists from San Francisco in a way because they're barking up the wrong tree. I don't think you could find better better stewards of good ideals of community relations than the Poliquins and how they've done the Ixtaca project in resurfacing the town and educating the townspeople and taking them to other mines to show them what the upside could look like and making sure they get water as a part of the mine construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so really barking up the wrong tree with that one.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the 4.5 million gold equivalent ounces are across all categories. I believe in the measured and indicated category, it's 2.5 million gold equivalent ounces. And I should also mention that there's been some recent discoveries a couple of kilometers away from the main deposit that bode well for future exploration. Lots of upside on that front as well. So I think it's a clear takeout target. I've thought that for about 5 years now, but the project keeps getting better with better economics. And again, it's a feasibility stage project. So a lot of the risk, has really been mitigated by Morgan and his team over at Almaden.
I like it.
I think it's off to enjoy the weekend. For everybody listening, it's likely Monday. Have a great week. Nick, anything you want to add before we take off?
Nope, I got a pizza date with my 2-year-old. I'm happy.
Love it. Go enjoy. My dad is in from Mexico visiting for the week, so we're going to spend some family time there. It's episode 11 of Bizarro World. Have a great week, everybody.
See ya.